Hello, and welcome back to Musings from an Expert. Thank you for tuning into the third episode in my mini-series on Conservative MisManagement. Today, I want to talk to you about how this Conservative government is unable, or unwilling maybe, to deal with complex issues and instead hides behind slogans and increasingly feeble excuses. Now, Theresa May likes to tell us that her leadership is strong and stable. In this post, I want to highlight 3 examples which indicate the fallacy of this slogan. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Southern Rail disputes, attacks on the judiciary, and finally about food bank use by nurses. So, first of all, Southern Rail. Southern Rail currently operates several routes, mainly in the south of England and London. It's a jointly owned venture by parent companies Go Ahead, who are based in Britain, and Keolis, who are based in France. As many of you will know, Southern, the brand name of Govia Thameslink, have been involved in some sort of industrial dispute with their workers. Now, I don't want to go into the reasons for this here, but the dispute hasn't really shown Southern in the best light. They've kind of been portrayed, rightly or wrongly, as trying to basically bully their employees, with a lack of meaningful engagement with employees and unions on the issues surrounding the dispute. According to a BBC report, throughout 2016, 53,983 Southern services were either fully or partly cancelled. Averaged out across the year, that was more than 160 every day. It was the worst disruption since the rail industry was privatised in 1994, when signal workers went on strike multiple times over changes to their pay. As you'll notice, the government in 1994 was Conservative. It seems to be a pattern of Conservative government and industrial disputes. Now, you might think it's unfair to blame the UK government for a dispute between a private company and its employees, but the UK government, and the UK taxpayer in particular, has a significant share in this dispute. Because of the way that the contract was written, the UK taxpayer is responsible for all compensation claims against rail fares on Southern services. So according to this same BBC report, written in April 2017, the government set aside £15 million in compensation for passengers, and is just picking up the tab for a £38 million fall in fare revenue as a result of services not running. There is also the issue of the award of the contract to run these services in the first place. Even before this dispute escalated with strikes, which obviously caused service disruption, Southern was already a serial canceller of services. According to an article by a Conservative MP in The Telegraph, Govia has somehow managed to begin its new franchise with too few staff. You don't often hear that an airline has cancelled a flight because of insufficient pilots, but with extraordinarily incompetence, this company was cancelling trains on a daily basis because it didn't have enough drivers. So basically, this dispute isn't really costing the company money, and so they have no real incentive to negotiate in good faith. And this is where the government could, and arguably should, step in. Now, there are obviously question marks over what exactly the government could do to resolve this bit of dispute, but according to the Financial Times, there are some options, including handing the franchise over to Transport for London, which is an idea championed by Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, but it's reported that Transport Minister Chris Grayling is really loath to do this, and depending on what sources you read, this is either because it entails an unnecessary and difficult reorganisation, or more simply because the Conservatives are not willing to hand the franchise to a Labour mayor in a somewhat kind of almost pointless turf war. Rather than trying to deal with the core issues at the heart of this argument, this Conservative government has instead decided to attack the unions, and by extension the workers, with the introduction of increasingly punitive anti-strike legislation. Unfortunately for the government, this has proved ineffective, as the rail unions have continued to be relatively successful at mobilising their members, both to vote for and then take part in industrial action. The question you have to ask yourselves is, does this show strong and stable leadership? Or does it show a government which has run out of options and which is content to let this dispute carry on regardless of its impact on commuters, service users and Southern Rail staff? Now, changing tack, I want to talk to you about an argument that blew up after the Brexit result, centring around the British judiciary. Now, I don't want to get into a sort of deep philosophical discussion about the importance of the separation of powers, but for the sake of this video, please just understand that the UK has these two branches and that they are separate. Politicians make laws, and the judiciary carry out these laws. Sometimes the government might disagree with judges, but this is a feature of healthy democracy, and is one of the ways that government remains accountable. A good example of this would be the arbitrary arrest of citizens. So in a country with no separation, citizens can be arrested and held without trial indefinitely. This can lead to problems, obviously, if governments choose to use these powers to arrest political rivals and to silence any opposition. This can't happen in Britain because the legal branch is separate from the government. But, this is sort of beside the point. Basically, Theresa May wanted to be able to trigger the infamous Article 50 without a vote in Parliament. She was challenged legally, and the judges in this case decided that she couldn't do this. According to the judges, the government does not have the power under the Crown's prerogative to give notice pursuant to Article 50 for the UK to withdraw from the European Union. In response to this, a well-known daily newspaper in the UK decided to publish this headline: "Enemies of the people. Fury over out-of-touch judges who have declared war on democracy by denying 17.4 million Brexit voters and who could trigger constitutional crisis." Understandably, this caused a huge row to erupt between people who basically understand how the UK judicial and government system works and those who don't. There was a huge argument in the popular press, on social media, inside Parliament, and in the wider European legal community. And despite intense pressure, it took a full 36 hours for the then Justice Secretary to give a kind of somewhat bland statement declaring, "The independence of the judiciary is the foundation upon which our rule of law is built, and our judiciary is highly respected the world over for its independence and impartiality." However, this message was somewhat undermined a little bit by her colleagues, including Jeremy Hunt, who stated, "There are plenty of times when I haven't liked the tone of the Daily Mail. There are plenty of times I don't like the tone of the BBC, but that is democracy." Kind of belittling this whole dispute, I think. And then Theresa May herself stated, "I believe in and value the independence of our judiciary. I also value the freedom of the press. It is important that we have a free press." Now, for me, both of these statements totally miss the point that people are making about this article. No one is saying that the free press or a free press is a bad thing. It's another way in which government can be held to account. But there is a question over the extent to which the press should be discouraged from writing overly incendiary articles and headlines about issues they don't seem to fully understand. The fact that judges disagree with parliamentarians occasionally is not a sign of constitutional crisis. It's a sign of a healthy working democracy with a balance of power. The judiciary is also strongly discouraged from talking to the press, and so when it's attacked, it's up to others to defend it. Unfortunately, Liz Truss, the Justice Secretary at the time, seemed unwilling to do that, despite it quite literally being her job. The question you have to ask yourself is, do you want a government that is willing to have its power limited by a constitution? Or do you want a government that seems to think it has some sort of God-given right to do what it likes with the support of an increasingly reactionary press? Finally, I want to talk to you a little bit about an interview that Theresa May gave recently, where she was discussing with an interviewer, and he sort of said, "We have nurses going to food banks at the moment. This must be wrong." To which her response was, "We have, and there are many complex reasons why people go to food banks." Now, I know that this has been said many times before, but I think that it is worth restating here. No, Theresa, it is not a complex issue. These people do not have enough money for food. No one chooses to go to a food bank. Why would they? I mean, imagine working full-time as a nurse or in any other profession and then finding that at the end of the week you don't have enough money to pay for food for you and your family. This shouldn't happen. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about this, but basically under the Conservative government, food bank use has dramatically increased. According to the data, the charity, the Trussell Trust's Food Bank Network, provided 1.183954 three-day emergency food supplies to people in crisis between April 16 and March 2017, compared with just over 1.1 million the previous year. A report by the charity has revealed of these, 436,000 went to children. For comparison, in 2009, the last full year of a Labour government, this figure was just under 26,000 in total, not just for children or anything. So the point that I want to make is that once again, Theresa May has totally failed to address the issue. When challenged, she simply talked about the need to build a strong economy, and yes, this is true, but what does it mean? What is the use in economic growth if it only applies to corporations or those at the top? What is the point in having a growing economy if nurses are having to use food banks? She talks about a country that works for the many and not just the privileged few, but simply isn't following through. She claims we want to create high-paid jobs. Yes, Theresa, but what about those on low pay? What about nurses? No answer. So when asked directly whether food bank usage under a Conservative government would continue to rise, she failed to deny it. Is this the government that you want to wake up to on June 9th? Do you want a government which will allow food bank usage by nurses to continue to rise? Do you want a government which is beholden to a reactionary press and which fails to defend our basic constitutional rights? And do you trust a government who can't even negotiate a settlement with a union to negotiate with 27 other member states? Once again, thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this post, please like and subscribe. If you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them below. Thank you very much for watching. Ciao!